Hey Skeeters, and today we're going to be covering Standard 2B, so let's go ahead and take a look. So, Standard 2B states, analyze the influence of mythic, classical, and traditional literature on 20th and 21st century literature. So basically, we're looking at how old books, and the examples I'm going to give you today aren't necessarily ancient. They're not like super far removed from where we are today as far as time period goes. But we want to look at and be able to connect how classic, traditional, or mythic type novels from a long time ago affect or influence books that we read now. Okay? So, how does old literature impact things that are written today? And so, this isn't necessarily a skill that's going to be like you're going to be asked a question about it, like on a test or something. But what this is going to do is it's really going to help your connections within your writing. Maybe a lot of times it's going to be used in your writing, but how to connect ideas, themes, different things like that, language, how to interpret language. So it's going to really help you though in your writing. So being able to have a bank in your brain of different things to compare, if that makes sense. And I'll kind of go into detail, but here are a few examples. Okay, so this is a book called Lord of the Flies. If you like kind of that adventure thriller, not really going to know what's happening, this is a book that you would want to read. It's about a group of boys who are stranded on an island and they're trying to obviously get off the island. It does turn a little violent, so that's interesting. But when I looked at this, when I was thinking of this book, I immediately thought of The Hunger Games. Okay, so if you're not familiar with that book, it came out probably early 2000s, I think. Don't quote me on that. But it's more recent, and it's that dystopian society where the government is kind of controlling the people, and there's different places where these people live, and every year they send them to the Hunger Games to kind of remind them. There was a civil war at one time between all the people, and they were trying to remind them why they need peace, and send two kids from every station or every location where they live, and there's only one winner, and they have to fight off everyone else. And so you can imagine how gruesome that situation is. So they're very similar in that they have children fighting for survival and kind of that adventure aspect to it. So these examples that I'm going to give you, I'm not saying that the older books directly affected or were directly the reason why these newer books were written, but you can kind of make those connections and be able to use examples from both books to compare. So that's kind of where this standard is going. Another example is Romeo and Juliet. So we have the classic Shakespearean novel play. We all are familiar with Romeo and Juliet, the feuding families, the forbidden love, that whole kind of feel to it, those themes. And so one that came to mind, it's a little bit older, but it's the West Side Story. Very similar. That feuding groups of people, but then you've got the forbidden love background to it, and so these are very similar. You can compare them. They're very different in the style and the situations, but again, they're very, very similar. Another example, To Kill a Mockingbird. So this is about kind of that idea of civil rights, the racial discrimination, and I mean, it gets even further into a situation that is very intense. So this book is one that you have to kind of be prepared to read as far as social issues arise and come. But it's a very good book. The example that I thought of immediately was The Help. This was also a movie, and a lot of these books are, but The Help is about when the time period when African American women were used as, I guess, in-home servants is basically how it looks. They were used for help around the house, taking care of children, doing the chores, and then the background of this, they're mistreated. They're not treated equally, and so that's kind of where To Kill a Mockingbird and The Help coincide. That's where they connect. So reading these books and knowing those connections, again, you can use them in your writing when you're comparing things. The last example I have for you, the Odyssey. This is another classic. It's kind of that Greek god hero's journey type of book. This was a book that I was assigned to read when I was in high school, and it was definitely hard to get through because of the language, and the storyline wasn't necessarily one that captured my attention, but it is a good book. It's a novel. It's about his journey. It's about Odysseus' journey trying to protect himself and his family. So there's that. And then the example that I have to compare to that is Percy Jackson. So I know a lot of our younger readers are accustomed to this. It's very popular. It has all the movies, kind of same deal with all the modern literature. But again, it's that hero's journey, that connection with interacting with mythological characters. And so it may not be a perfect lineup, it may not be a perfect comparison, but it's definitely one that you can make if you needed an example to compare to, like in your writing or something. So hopefully that helps understand kind of where this standard 2B comes from. Again, this one's going to be very helpful when you go into a writing situation where you're having to come up with ideas of examples to write about, and if you're asked to compare things. This is a great way to be able to use modern literature and classic literature together. So we empower, we impact, we love. We are Skeeter Nation.